This is a lecture from OpenTuition. To benefit from the lecture, you should download the free lecture notes from opentuition.com.
Within organizational structures, there are several well-defined, well-recognized levels: strategic, tactical, and operational. And they deal with different preoccupations. They've got different functions here. We have our strategic level at the top, and basically the strategic level, think of that as the board of directors. They should be thinking in terms of strategy, and I think I already mentioned that whenever you see the word strategy or strategic, you should be thinking of it like about 5 years, maybe to 10 years. They will be thinking, what will this organization be dealing with, selling to? What will its competition be like? What sort of products will be making in 5 to 10 years? The long-term safety, if you like, of the organization. A lot of the information they need, therefore, is very forward-looking, very much based on estimates, trying to predict what the future is going to be. The strategic managers, the board, of course, does have a responsibility for looking at current results and how the organization is dealing with current problems and is it going to hit its budget and so on. But there is a really specific requirement now in corporate governance that we are going to be focusing on long-term health and safety and security of a company and its investors. So they should be very outward-looking. They will be very anxious to find as much information as they can about developments, maybe how economies are going to be moving, what's going to be happening maybe in the EU over the next 5 years, and so on. Right at the bottom, we have got people here, operational. These people are essentially dealing with transaction processing. These are dealing with day-to-day. Operational people will be answering the phone, dealing with customers, dispatching goods, and the like. Very short term, they tend to be recording what's actually happened, recording transactions as they actually occur, whereas a strategic person will often be looking at budgets and estimates for the future. The strategic people will tend to be dealing very much in summaries. For large companies, they might be interested into sales to the nearest million, whereas the operational people will be recording it as sale to the nearest cent and so on. Very kind of different outlooks. A kind of squeeze in the middle, I suppose. Here we have the tactical. Think of the tactical managers looking maybe for about a year. These managers will be anxious that they hit this year's budget, because if they don't, they're going to get into a bit of a problem maybe. So they will be keeping an eye on the fairly short run, about a year, managing to hit budgets, hit targets, and so on, hit profit targets for the particular year. They need a bit of a mix of short-term, longer-term information. They need to know how we've traded for the first 9 months. They need to know how we think we're going to be trading for the next 3 months, so that 12 months overall we know whether or not we're going to be getting the targets or not. So strategic level, tactical level, operational, different levels of detail, different outlooks which are going to be required. When we're dealing with functional organizations, remember we divided into purchasing, sales, research and development, accounting, IT, and so on. Another aspect of that is what's called tall, narrow, wide, flat. The overall kind of shape of the organization. And a tall, narrow organization has got lots and lots of layers, lots of kind of supervisors, senior supervisors, assistant managers, managers, people at the top and so on there. But each manager or supervisor looks after relatively few people. And this here, the way I've drawn this here, everyone's looking after two people coming out. Here, what's called the span of control is 2. Well, I've drawn a very uniform fashion, but generally the taller the organisation, the more kind of subdivided it's going to be. We're just looking after relatively few people. And this is a very kind of traditional structure. It's still found, it still has to be found in some places, but still maybe particularly found in government. It's kind of synonymous with a very kind of intense bureaucracy. This person must report there, and then this person must report there, and so on. And it used to work okay when businesses were very static. When they'd be doing really the same thing for the next 10 years, this would be almost like a fairly well-oiled machine, really. But it wasn't really found fit for purpose once markets began changing very quickly and technology began changing very quickly. Because you would have the new graduate coming in here who maybe know all about social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and so on. The people at the top here, you've been in the organisation for kind of 30 years, have never heard of Twitter or Facebook or YouTube, or as I like to call them, Twitface. But this person here knows all about the power of social media and how to use it. And this person would say to the manager there about it, and this manager would think about it and refer it up there, and so on. Kind of come up to the top, really. And every time it went through a manager, the message would be changed slightly, either deliberately or accidentally. It's a bit like you may have played as a child a game where you kind of stood in a circle and you'd whisper something to the person on your left, they would whisper to the next person, and so on, all the way around. And perhaps you kind of whispered, ice cream to this person here. And but the time it came round here, the answer was elephant or something entirely different. It got completely distorted in that. There's a bit of that going on in here. There's also delay because you tell something to your manager, and that manager thinks about it for a couple of days, and then she goes up and then it has to kind of trickle back down again. And it's very slow. Also, what tended to happen with these organizations was that everybody had a little title. And sometimes there's a culture that goes on in here, which is called a role culture. We'll talk about cultures later, but it's a role culture. Everyone had a job title, a job description, and they would stick very kind of strictly to what that job description was. And each of these had their little perks, little entitlements. And I can remember once again as a trainee auditor being in a company, and the whole company had about 27 layers from right at the bottom, and then little intermediate layers as well. But this person who worked in internal audit was promoted from layer, 4.5 to 4.6 or something of that sort. And immediately went out and looked at the staff handbook. Staff handbook, of course, produced by the technostructure. And so, right, I'm now level 4.6. This means I'm entitled to a chair with arms on it. I'm entitled to a nicer looking wastepaper basket because, of course, I'm now a higher grade. My waste is of higher quality. I'm entitled to a little bit of carpet under my desk. And I'm entitled to 2 extra square meters of room, if you like. And I promise you, before the day was over, this manager had done all of this. He had got the new chair, he had got the new wastepaper basket, he'd got the bit of carpet under his desk, and the company carpenters had come in and moved the wall of his office back a little bit to give him the 2 extra square meters. And he would not have been happy if that hadn't been done, because this was a kind of evidence of his stature within the organisation. And people would then protect it. People would cling on to these little entitlements, and if you wanted to reorganise stuff, they would all be very stubborn. What has happened over the last 25, 30 years is a great movement that way. It's been brought about for a number of reasons. First of all, cost pressure. You had, to some extent in here, managers supervising assistant managers, supervising senior supervisors, supervising supervisors, supervising assistant supervisors, on all kind of doubling up on everybody's work, duplicating. Because if you're just looking after two people, then you've got 2.5 days a week to supervise them, or to interfere with them, or to redo their work. It wasn't very efficient. A lot of costs going on in here, in management, and maybe not accomplishing anything very much. So one reason was, let's get rid of these, and they called it delayering. Get rid of layers, or they called it flattening. And they went through deliberate projects to do this. They get rid of a lot of these middle managers, and now we have wider flat, and here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have a span of control equals 7. 7 people directly going up. Again, I've drawn it very uniformly. It wouldn't normally be as uniform as that. Now what this means is, of course, if you're looking after 7 people, you can't redo their work. You simply haven't got time to redo their work. It implies you're going to be better at delegating, telling people what to do. It implies that these people are going to be better because their work isn't going to be rechecked to the same extent. You must be able to trust them, you must train them better, and so on. But one of the great things is that the speed of communication between the people at the bottom, who maybe know a lot of good stuff, and the people at the top, is much shorter, much faster, much more reliable, and you're going to be less intimidated. If you were down here, speaking to somebody up here, you probably think, do I have to bow down to them before I speak to them? They're so much higher than you are. But here it's a much more kind of egalitarian. And there are fewer perks, there's no reserved parking, everybody eats in the same kind of canteen and so on. People don't have these perks. That makes it much more flexible, much more easy to change, in the face of new competition, and new technology. And most people have moved towards wide flat. The only ones who've really stuck with tall narrow are, first of all, government organizations who are kind of steeped in bureaucracy, and sometimes organizations, if they're carrying on something which is very risky, maybe an oil refinery, chemical works, nuclear power station, something of that sort, then the intense supervision that you can get here of somebody really kind of double checking what somebody else has done is maybe required for safety purposes in those rather extreme situations. Centralisation and decentralisation. The shape of the organisation, whether it's wide, flat or tall, narrow that we had here, doesn't really say anything about, for example, whether this person here has got spending authority of 100 or 1,000. It doesn't say anything necessarily about the way power is put down through the organisation. That is what centralisation, decentralisation looks at. Where is the power in the organisation? If you had a completely centralised organisation, it would mean that the single person at the top would make all decisions. And that is bad for these reasons. First of all, that person simply would not have time to make proper decisions. They would be overburdened. They'd have a great pile of documents, if you like, there waiting for their attention. Everything slows down, and by the time the decision is made, the opportunity's gone. Speed, sometimes you want a quick answer. The customer wants a quick answer. Expertise. I come from an accounting background. Let's say I was the head of the company. There is no point in coming to me, asking me about marketing decisions or advertising in France, I don't have marketing expertise. I don't know anything about the French market. the person best suited to deciding on advertising in the French market is the marketing manager based in Paris. Motivation. Good people like being given responsibility. They will not stay if they're not given responsibility. It is very, very motivating to somebody, to say, you're in charge of this, you make the decisions. You keep an eye on them, of course, but you make the decisions, you make it work. And when you've made a decision and you get success from that is a fantastically motivating event. And good people want this kind of ability to make decisions. And finally, training and assessment. If you never delegate, because this is essentially dealing with delegation, if you never delegate to people, how are you going to identify the good ones? Who do you know who to promote? Who do you know maybe who needs help in making decisions? Because everything is coming from the top. However, the downside is poor coordination. You're devolving decisions down the organization. How do we know that all the decisions are good for the organization? And to give a very kind of extreme example, it was in an organization which had grown very quickly by acquisition, in other words, by buying other companies, all over the world, really. And most people in the organization, certainly further down in the organization, kind of didn't really instantly recognize who was part of the group, because they didn't change the name of the companies they took over. They wanted to keep their brand name. So if you're given, a kind of list of companies and said, who's in our group, who isn't in our group, it wasn't a very reliable, people couldn't answer very reliably. And there were two subsidiaries who began bidding for a government contract. And they were bidding against each other, but they didn't know that they were part of the same group. And of course, all that happened was they brought down the price of the contract for the group. Through just pure bad coordination, somebody higher up in the organization should have spotted these two people are bidding for the same contract in competition to each other. Let's get one of them to withdraw, and maybe we'll get a better deal for the group overall. So this is always a risk. Sometimes it's called dysfunctional decision making. So dysfunctional decision making, just kind of bad decision making. Sometimes it's called a lack of goal congruence. That you can get divisions or subsidiaries pursuing their own best interests rather than working as part of a team and pursuing the group's best interests. Recent trends, there has been downsizing, getting rid of employees. Downsizing often happens when two companies merge. You combine IT departments, you combine accounting departments, and so on, so that the two together employ fewer people than the two separately, if you like. That's a form of downsizing. Downsizing has also often been caused also by this delayering, this move from tall, narrow to the wide, flat structures. Part of the purpose was getting rid of these middle managers who were maybe not adding very much value. And then outsourcing, when we looked at the type of hollow organizations and so on, we said that many organizations are beginning to say, right, I will do what I'm really good at. I may be really good at research and development and design, and I get these people to make it. I'll get these people to market it. I'll get these people to distribute it. They're very good at that. Let them do very well what they do, and I'll do very well what I do. And this, particularly maybe because business has become so complex. Production has become so complex, it can be very difficult for one company to be good at everything. So car companies, they don't usually make their own brakes. They get specialist brake manufacturers to do that. They don't make really their own the electronics in the car. That's made by somebody else, and so they don't make their tires. That's made by a tire company. The way things are going to minute is to look after what you're really good at and outsource the rest. Finally, on this, we have got formal and informal organizations, or formal and informal parts of organizations. I'll explain what the shape means in a moment, but basically the formal part of an organization is what is usually written down, recorded formally in some way. So it could be procedures manuals here on health and safety, in your holiday entitlements, the quality control procedures and so on, all the kind of techno-structure stuff. You can have a mission statement often appearing on websites or on sets of financial statements, saying what the organization is for, what its values are. You have staff appraisals formally recorded, saying what you're good at, what you're not so bad at, not so good at, and so on. Organization charts, whether it's a matrix structure, a tall, narrow, divisional structure, whatever it is, it's usually written down and names put on it. That's all of the formal organization. And then we have the informal parts of it. This is what's not written down. And the reason for the diagram being like this here is it's supposed to be really a diagram looking at, if I put you probably can't see that very well. It's always a waste of time, but there we have a penguin. And basically what we have here is an iceberg. And what you can see of an iceberg is the formal bits. But what you can't see, and the majority perhaps of the iceberg under the water, what you can't see is the informal structure here. And just as maybe many ships have found out that it is, you have more problems with what can't be seen in an iceberg than what can be seen in an iceberg. And this is what the problem from management is. First of all, they may not understand all of these informal structures really, and if they make the wrong management decisions, it's likely to be quite serious. So what we have in this informal parts of the organization here, we have personal ambitions. So we all have our personal ambitions. Perhaps our personal ambition is I'm going to stay with this firm for 2 years, get some experience, then I'm going to move on. Now you're unlikely to actually tell your manager that. It's unlikely to be recorded in your staff appraisal that this person is going to be moving on in 2 years. You're going to keep that secret. But nevertheless, what's maybe motivating you when you say, well, I'd like to move to that department and have some experience there, is not so much that you're interested in it or going to be good at it. You just think it's going to look good on your CV. Other personal ambitions, your personal ambition might be to have an easy time. Or your personal ambition might be to earn a lot of money. But we're different. And no one is going to admit normally to the manager, I work here because I have to. I kind of want an easy time. I'm not gonna extend myself too much here. I just want a nice easy time, enough money to kind of live on. And of course then when people up here say, well, would you like promotion? This person might say no, and you're a bit surprised. Or you say, I'd like people to work overtime. This person doesn't want to work overtime. And this is the first you find out about it. Personal preferences. Personal preferences can be, or personal indeed relationships, who you get on with. So you might hate working with somebody, and this is going to interfere obviously with the function of the organization. You form alliances with people. You say to people, and this is in a way maybe dealing with kind of group norms as well. Group norms is a kind of way in which you all agree to act. You kind of all agree with each other. I'm not going to produce more than 50 items a day. You know, if you put your mind to it, you could do 60, but everyone says, oh, I can only do 50, only do 50. And they're kind of holding back. And if they all say I can only do 50, they've got these alliances, everybody's saying the same thing, they're kind of almost colluding really, to fight against management trying to get production up. There's rumour and gossip. Rumour and gossip, frequently around the coffee machine or the water cooler, as people say. It's a very quick way of information being disseminated. It may not always be accurate information. It may be what I think nowadays is called alternative facts here. But it whizzes around organizations like mad. As somebody once said, gossip can have got to the end of the world before truth has got its shoes on. And gossips, maybe rumours about closing down, redundancies, no wage rises, and so on, can be very, very disruptive in organisations. People taking shortcuts. We know what they should do in terms of quality, in terms of safety, but they begin to take shortcuts because it's easier doing something else, and a lot of leads to stuff being produced which has got quality control problems and so on. And finally, mutual cover-up. Somebody makes a mistake and their friends cover up. They say it was the machine that broke down, rather than saying, well, he did it wrong. Maybe he needs some training. Initially, management, and it got back to this idea that early management theory almost treated people like machines. It said, I'll give you an order, you'll do it. It was that kind of assumption about management. Now we know far more about it, that there's this whole bit here is all to do with really the social aspect of an organisation. You get on with people. You like some people. You don't like other people. If I cover up from this employee and this, maybe that employee will cover up for me there. We'll kind of help each other and so on. And it is very important, but very difficult for management to try to understand and get insight into these very powerful informal influences in people within organizations.